Hello, I'm Kads, and welcome to today's video. So today we're going to be doing a showcase of my Ice Golem Stage 10 hard mode team. You can consider this to be a continuation of the Raid Starter Pack episode I did for the Ice Golem, which will be linked in the card up above if you want to check that out. In that video, I did cover more of the progression between the early game, mid game, end game, focusing on the normal mode stages of the Ice Golem, but today we're going to be focusing on hard mode stage 10. Now, in the interest of full transparency, I will issue this disclaimer right out of the gate, and this is more of a free-to-play-ish strategy as far as the category of the video is concerned, because you've seen the title, you've seen the thumbnail, you know that we're going to be focusing on Harima, specifically in this composition as a counter to Ice Golem Hard, and so if you don't really have Harima on your account, then unfortunately this team probably won't be that helpful to you. But if you're one of the lucky few like myself who happens to have her on your account, if you're a low spender, even if you're a whale, you can check out this team and see if it works for you. So at first you might be thinking, Harima, why on earth would we use her in PvE? She's primarily a PvP champion, which is generally true, although she is a pretty hefty damage dealer in Hydra, to be fair. But I understand how you would think that, because if we go through her kit really quickly, A1 here has a chance to place decrease attack, and it could also place it on an AoE if it's critical. A2, triple hitter that can reduce the target's defense and increase her own up to 100%, so double damage, and it can instantly activate the A3 if it happens to kill someone, and the A3 is the big AoE that can provoke targets for one turn, really powerful against demon spawn because they can't block or resist it. But the reason we're bringing Harima into this team is actually because of her passive here, which everyone is probably familiar with as far as reducing the enemy ignore defense effects by 50%, but everyone thinks of that in the context of arena. You know, you're reducing the effect of Savage, of a Baron, of a Georgid, of all, you know, of Cruel, of all those types of champions, Merciless. But in this case for Ice Golem, we know that his retribution hit, his counterattack, will ignore 50% of your defense for each minion alive. So if both minions are alive and you get unlucky with the retribution hit, he's ignoring all of your defense. Well, her passive actually works against bosses. So in that worst case scenario, even if the Ice Golem gets a retribution hit with both minions alive, he's only going to ignore 50% of your defense, which is a substantial decrease in terms of damage reduction. Defense, for those who don't know, is just a proxy for damage reduction. And so 50% is a lot less damage, and so you can actually survive the hits a lot better, and especially if you have decreased attack on the boss, which we're going to try and maintain as long as possible, even though he does cleanse himself. But you combine decreased attack with the retribution hit and Harima's passive, and pretty much your entire team can actually stay alive, provided they're moderately tanky. So let's go ahead and take a look at the team that I have to showcase for you today. And I know, definitely more of a pay-to-win team, but there is going to be a free-to-play-ish, air quotes, variation that I will show after this one, but this is my primary team, so I do want to show you the fastest run that I've been able to pull off with my champions. So in this team, we do have Duhanarak, and she's very, very powerful for this dungeon. She brings decreased attack, block buffs, decreased speed, as well as increased defense and increased speed, on top of being able to cleanse like a Doom Priest every single turn she takes. We brought in Pythion as one of our safety conditions, where he can revive people if they go down, but he's also a full cleanser with block debuffs, so we can prevent the minions and the waves and the minions on the boss from placing debuffs on us, as well as providing some healing with his A1 and A2. Pythion was a previous fusion champion, so hopefully you do have him on your account. Of course, we brought in Artak as our win condition. He provides a lot of AoE HP burn, AoE HP burn activation, as well as decreased attack and a chance to extend HP burns on the A1. Super powerful champion, and also relatively free to obtain way back during the Call of the Arbiter days. We brought in Theodore, which in my case is just a champion who helps us speed up the waves, but also helps us speed up the boss phase by being a secondary HP burn activator. And then for the waves, he provides a lot of poisons and poison activation to help again speed up the waves. And then the star of the show here, Harima, like we already mentioned, her passive being able to mitigate the worst case scenario happening on the boss, but also she does provide provokes for the waves, so a little bit of CC and a lot of damage. She's our primary DPS as far as the waves are concerned. So let's go ahead and see this team in action, and I will talk about some of the AI overrides that are somewhat important if you wanted to run this exact composition. So one of the things I did do was have Duhanarak open with her A2, the decrease attack and decrease and block buffs, and it's an opener don't use. I do use a lot of opener don't use in this composition, and so that's because I want her to start with that on the boss phase so that we have decrease attack out there. Of course, there's a 3% chance that it gets resisted and that she doesn't actually get it off, but that's kind of rare, and we probably won't see that, at least in this showcase for today. Opener don't use also applies to Theodore. We want him to open with the AoE poison but not use it, so they can open on wave 2 with that. And so again, Duhanarak coming in with the decreased attack and block buffs. Harima, I guess we killed wave 1 a little bit too quickly, so she's not back to her provoke just yet, but she'll come right around to it here. But I also have her opener, don't use that on wave 1, so that we have the provoke ready for wave 2. So you can see we're combining a bunch of different things. We have some raw damage from Harima, we have the HP burn from Artak, we have the poisons and HP burn activation from Theodore, and so we can kind of chunk the waves down pretty easily. And there's a showcase of Harima doing her job with the A2 and getting the free proc on the A3. There's our decrease attack from Tuhanarok. Doesn't matter if she attacks the minions because it is a debuff spread effect, and it's fine if the boss cleanses because we have Artak in there, who's our primary decrease attack champion. So as you saw there, it was about a minute or so to get through the waves, which is relatively fast, probably faster than average. And at this point, we basically just kind of sit there and start burning the boss down. I think Theodore and Artak happened to be out of sync a little bit there, so Theodore activated nothing, but and that can happen sometimes. But usually they'll be kind of more in sync before the boss cleanses himself and stuff. So we're going to see in this composition, I don't have a high level of brimstone, like 5-star, 6-star, and so even if it lands on the boss, he cleanses it off before it would take effect when he does his AE2 or whatever, and so that's not really helping us at all. But blessings do help you take less damage from the boss, as well as do a little bit more damage. So we're kind of seeing that we can take a little bit, or we're chunking down the boss here with HP burn, HP burn activation as well. Usually we kill a couple of the minions along the way. Another showcase of Harima doing her thing there. And we might not actually get the retribution hit on this particular run. It definitely does not happen every time. It's here and there. It kind of depends. And this might be a case where we don't actually get it. Yeah, once again, Brimstone, even though it landed there, it's not really going to do anything because he's going to cleanse it off, even if it was at the right time. What is kind of cool is that my Harima, she's not actually built with enough accuracy to land decrease attack on a regular basis. Okay, retribution hit, there we go. So you can see there, even though both minions were dead, we didn't take that much damage. Part of it is because all the buffs we have on the team, we have increased defense, we have, well, strengthen after the revive, but Tuhanarok providing a lot of defensive buffs, and then Python's passive, forgot to mention that, you just take less damage for each buffs, or for as many buffs on the champions, so that is also very helpful. Soul Reap there on Harima, you can see that helping us kill the minions. But yeah, like I was saying, we probably won't get the worst case retribution. No, I lied. There we go. So there we go. So that was 1 minion alive, retribution hit. Speaking, you shall receive. But so that was kind of half of the worst case scenario. We did have decreased attack on the boss at that moment. We had 1 minion alive, so he was going to ignore 50% of our defense if that were allowed to happen normally. But in that case, he only ignored 25%, and you can see he barely did any damage, and the entire team, minus Artak there, stayed alive. But Artak is a little bit special case because he reduces his max HP to half, and so he's just more susceptible to dying. So that's the team. It usually is, you can see their best time is around 2.5 minutes, but it ranges anywhere between 2.5 and 3.5 depending on the RNG. Like I said, if Theodore and Artak aren't perfectly in sync just by happenstance with him placing the burns and then Theodore activating it afterward, I do have them speed tuned such that Artak is faster than Theodore for that reason. So depending on their synergy, they might be faster or slower, but that's usually the time frame that it takes to run this dungeon. So yeah, we actually got lucky to be unlucky there, but we did get to see kind of what I'm talking about with the retribution hit and being able to reduce the damage we take regardless of the number of minions alive. And so it's, again, the ignore defense is going to be reduced by half. So it's going to be 25% if only 1 minion is alive, and only 50% of your defense being ignored if both minions are alive, which is substantially easier to survive, provided you have some relatively tanky champions. That I'm not saying that you can run a team of super squishy people plus Harima and you're going to survive the hits. You're probably still going to die in that instance. They need to be somewhat robust, and you can see we basically have all supports, and then Harima's are one relatively tanky DPS because she's defense based. But you're still going to want to have a team of really strong supports because you don't really want to proc the retribution hits, but it is somewhat inevitable just because eventually it's going to happen. Someone's going to hit the threshold at the wrong time and it's going to trigger it. So Harima is our failsafe. I do also want to mention that I've been running this team for about 2 weeks now or so, just on and off, just testing it, looking and seeing if it was going to have the worst possible case scenario, which has happened, I think, once or twice, and they still survived and they were able to recover. But the worst case being decreased attack is not on and both minions are alive and we get a retribution hit. And it gets a bit dicey in that very, very niche situation. But like I said, so far it's been able to survive. But I could imagine a case where that happens while Harima happens to have died prior, which is unlikely, because we have a lot of support here to kind of minimize the chances of that happening, but I'm not going to promise you that it's never ever going to happen. You're going to get the perfect trifecta of bad RNG, and it could definitely fail if all of the stars aligned in the wrong way. But like I said, I've been running this for the past couple of Ice Golem tournaments, including the tourney attack that's going on right now for the past couple of weeks, and I've yet to see the team fail overall. So I'm fairly confident that it is a close to 100% success rate. As promised, I will show you guys also the more free-to-play friendly-ish team, and I say that with the air quotes because obviously you still need Harima. She is integral to this team, but I did make some more free-to-play substitutions. So we have Mithrala Lifebane in the lead now, replacing Tuhanarok. We still get the increased defense, but we also add increased attack, although it doesn't really benefit anyone on this particular team. We get the petrification chance if they do hit us with the Hex out, and most notably we add in the shield and the strengthen as well as the cleanse. So we have 2 cleansers on the team now, but we also use the shield to protect us when we get to the boss instead of having the decreased attack. Her abilities also synergize pretty well with Pythion's passive, so between her increased defense, increased attacks, shield and strengthen, and Pythion's block debuffs, we have all 5 of the buffs to maximize Pythion's damage reduction passive. The other swap we made was dropping off Theodore, and we put in Walking Tomb Drang, who is fairly popular for this dungeon anyways, who's a previous fusion, but even if you don't have him, you missed the fusion or you started playing afterward, I've also run this exact same team with Drexler Blood Twin in this spot. Both of these champions are going to be slower than Theodore, of course, just because they're not activating poisons on an AoE, they're doing it single target, or Drexler is just placing it more with this passive. And so I would say this team, as we'll see, takes closer to around 4 minutes, and the Drexler version of this comp takes closer to 4.5 minutes. So it will definitely take longer, but nonetheless, these are ways to combat this boss if you just want to do it for the first time, or if you find that time acceptable for your runs. So I'm going to go ahead and run this one as well, so you guys can see it in action just to confirm the time that it will take. And I'll mention a little bit once again about AI overrides. I will also go over the builds and all of the champions featured on these teams. So as far as the opener don't use, in this case we have Mithrala opening and not using her her hexing ability, increased defense, increased attack, because we really only need to power up Harima's AoE one time, and after that we don't really need it. And I want her to use her A1 as much as possible, just to start throwing some poisons out there to do more damage to the waves. We have Walking Tomb Drang in here, who can be our AoE HP burner for the waves. I guess will help HP burn the waves as well as HP burn the boss. And so I do have him lead with his AoE HP burn, and then I switched our attacks priorities to prioritize the HP burn activation first, and then prioritize his own HP burn, just to kind of flip that order, just to make them synergize and not be redundant. So unfortunately there we didn't kill Broad Mob before he got the revive off, but it's not a big deal. So that is going to add to our time, unfortunately. That is part of the problem with me saying that the waves are a bit slower, because with Theodore, they basically die after their second turn, more or less, / Harima can get around and start killing them with the lucky A2 proc going into the A3. But nonetheless, it's still going to be successful. I'm not really worried about that. And so, yeah, AI overrides. So yeah, Drang is opener don't use on the AoE HP burn for all of the waves, and then he's allowed to use it freely for the boss stage. And then Artak, again, is inverted as far as his priority. Harima, same thing as before, where we save her provoke ability from wave 1 to make sure that we have it on her first turn here, as we'll see, and then she's free to use it repeatedly for wave 2 and beyond. I forgot to mention that in the last run that I do turn off her A3, Harima's A3, for the boss phase, because we don't want her to AoE on the boss and potentially activate a retribution hit. Again, we want to minimize that. Ooh, Soul Reap making its debut there, or showcase there. So yeah, Mithrala, we don't use her cleanse until we get to wave 3, because we just don't really need it. And you can see there, it basically tanked the first hit despite us not having decreased attack on the boss. The shield plus the strengthen mitigated a ton of damage. And you can see overall that we are just taking a lot less damage compared to the Theodore comp. I will say that comp is a lot more greedy as far as killing the boss, but it is faster, and so that is the trade I was willing to make. So you can trade a little bit of speed for safety, stuff like that, but you can see here again with the Mithrala shield, Mithrala cleanse, and specifically with the Python passive, we are really, really tanky here, not really at risk of taking much damage from the boss's hits. So in this case, we may or may not get a retribution proc. Again, it's kind of RNG. It's not always guaranteed, and it's not always going to happen, but we'll see if we get unlucky, and it happens to happen with this run in particular. I will say that we'll kind of go over it when we talk about the champion builds, but you generally speaking don't want your champions in this type of team to have Giant Slayer War Master, because that just increases the chances of you getting a retribution hit, particularly if they have an AoE ability like Artak or Walking Tomb Drang. In this case, both of them have AoEs. I think my Walking Tomb Drang does have War Master because I use him predominantly in other areas of the game, so he is at risk of proccing a random or rogue retribution hit if he does his AoE at the wrong time. You can see the War Master hit right there. It looks like, yep, we got a retribution pocket there, and it wasn't too bad because both minions were dead. So we'll see, we'll keep watching this to see if we actually get the bad situation here where we proc it with both of the minions alive, because they did get revived. You can also see that Python has Life Harvest on. That's predominantly for Arena, but nonetheless, it is kind of side beneficial here because the minions are going to be just ever so less tanky when they come back to life. So we'll see here if we can get it before Harima kills one of the... No, she killed one of the minions. Okay, Harima too strong. But yeah, there's the power of the double cleanse. You can kind of see there Python getting rid of the heal reduction. The other minion places AoE decreased defense. And so it's just less of a burden to worry about that when you have a double cleanser strategy. So we're just passing the 4-minute mark. It's going to take a little bit longer here. A couple more HP burn activations should do the trick more or less. And then Soul Reap on Harima might also do the trick there. So, okay, 1 minion alive, same as the first team. And you can see we took even less damage than the previous team. So once again, showing that Harima's passive really coming in clutch there for us to really not take a bunch of damage at all. I don't even think he busted through the shields despite ignoring some of our defense. So 4.5 minutes, like I mentioned, for this team. And that is with a little bit slower wave 1 because Broadmaw happened to get a turn and get the revive off. One other thing to mention about this team is that you can still make further substitutions if you happen to have the champions. A Wither the Crowned could work in the Mithrala slot because she also provides increased defense, again, which helps your team stay alive, but also powers up Harima to make sure she can do the most damage during the waves. She has a lot of continuous heals on her passive on top of a massive AoE heal that can just, again, help your team stay alive, help them running, and help Python with the healing because he doesn't always do enough. Walking Tomb Drang also does do some healing with his A3. If you're running Drexthar, again, this is going to be closer to 5.5 minutes, but that is a substitution because if you happen not to have Walking Tomb Drang. And then Python can actually be substituted for Elva Autumnborn if you happen to get her during her guaranteed event, or you were lucky enough to pull her. She provides a lot of healing with her passive. She places a lot of continuous heals with the passive, but also the Seal of the Drakes-esque heal whenever a champion on the team takes a turn. So again, just helps your team running basically a budget or a mini regen set on all of your champions effectively just by having her on the team. She does have a single target revive, so if multiple people go down at once, it's going to be a lot longer before you can recover the full team, but you can kind of play with your team order to make sure that she prioritizes whoever needs to come back alive first. So let's talk about some of the builds on these champions, and I do want to preface this like I always do for champion builds, that blessings are a bonus but not necessarily mandatory for the success rate of the run. It definitely helps to have, you know, high tiers of Brimstone or Soul Reap in this case helps you finish off bosses or minions or waves or whatever, as we kind of saw with Harima, but again, they're not integral to the success rate of the team. I'd still be able to kill the boss. It would just take slightly longer, for example, if I didn't have Soul Reap, or if I didn't have, well, I don't actually have a high tier of Brimstone. High tier of Brimstone would actually speed my runs up. If I get like a 5-star on Theodore or something, that'd be pretty cool. But anyways, so starting off, we have Tuhanarak here in triple perception. She is in one of my beastly builds on my account with a very high resistance and very high accuracy on top of speed. She is pretty tanky here. She is a support champion, 65,000 on the HP, 3,500 on the defense, 260 on the speed, so quite quick. Don't care about her damage, 453 on the resistance, and 356 on the accuracy. The Blessing, Brimstone, obviously one of the best things for PvE champions, and even though it's 1-star, that's basically all you need, and that's what most people are going to have when they're picking a Blessing for their champions, PvE focused. On the Blessing, or on the Masteries here, we come down the offense tree, hugging the left side, coming down to War Master, pretty standard debuffer set. And then on the support tree, we're kind of doing a mix of healing, HP kind of stats, but also picking up the turn meter because she does both both buffs and debuffs, and then also ending with lasting gifts and Master Hexer, because again, she does buffs and debuffs. So trying to maximize that, Lore of Steel as well, and then coming through Cycle of Magic just to get the split between the Master Hexer and lasting gifts. Next up, we have my cracked out Theodore, 4-star Awaken, got lucky with that blessing, and he is also a support, 66,000 on the HP, 3,800 on the defense, 245 on the speed. We don't care about his damage either, 490 on the resistance, and then 362 on the accuracy. Now, I do want to take a moment here and say that stacking your champions with resistance is not mandatory, because if you have a cleanser or you're running Mithrala and Pythion double cleanser, they can basically prevent the debuffs from landing on your team, the decreased accuracy, decreased defense, hero reduction. So you don't necessarily have to stack your champions with resistance. You can just focus on the accuracy that you need for the dungeon, which is around 350 if you want to be on the safer side. But because, again, like I said, I want to minimize the chance of rogue things happening that can end or wipe the team, I don't want most of my champions taking debuffs if they don't really need to. But just like Tuhanarok, another PvE champion, he's going to have Brimstone on the blessing. Like I said, I got lucky, pulled his 4-star, and so we do have 4-star Brimstone on him. For the masteries, we've seen these before if you've watched some of my videos, but we do come down the defense and support tree, notably ending on Oppressor. So this increases his turn meter fill rate, which is effectively speed, or speed is effectively turn meter fill rate, if you want to think about it that way. So for each active debuff that he places, which he places a lot of poisons and poison sensitivity out there, he just gets more turns sooner, which gets him to cycle a bit faster. And then of course we're grabbing Master Hexer and all the debuffer side masteries to make him go faster, give him a little bit more accuracy, a little bit of tankiness stats, resistance, and delay death, so he just takes less damage from bosses and enemy waves. Resurgent to remove a debuff if he happens to take a big smack. So very tanky support type masteries for him. Next to him, we do have Artak, and a very similar build. You'll see a trend amongst all these champions. I like to build them this way because, again, I want them to be self-sufficient as far as not taking debuffs and still being able to do their abilities. So Artak here, 84,000 on the HP, 3,000, 3,100 on the defense, 248 on the speed, 431 on the resistance, and I'm a little bit low because I want to be like 450 plus for all the champions, but because he's meant to be, his passive kicks in and increases his resistance, he effectively gets to 450 without me having to build him all the way out there. 356 on the accuracy. Once again, another PvE champion, so we're putting Brimstone on him as well. And the masteries, somewhat similar to Theodore, we're coming down notably to Oppressor for the same reason. When he's placing all the HP burn, decreased attack, his turn meter fill rate is increased, therefore he gets more turns and cycles a bit faster, specifically or particularly with increased speed as well. Master Hexer, increase the duration of the HP burn, decrease attack, debuffer side masteries here with the extra accuracy, and then coming down the similar defense tree to Theodore, but making sure to end on Retribution, because when he counterattacks, he does have a chance to extend the HP burn, which just helps us do a little bit more damage over time. And like I mentioned, we're trying to not go the War Master route for most of these champions, as you can see here with the primary sources of damage, the HP burners, not having those masteries. Tuhanarok does have War Master, but as you saw, she predominantly spends her time attacking the minions, so it's not that big of a deal. Next up, we have my Walking Tomb Drang, who's in Relentless and Speed. He does not need accuracy, so we didn't build him with any. He is a support once again, 71,000 on the HP, 3,000 on the defense, 252 on the speed, don't care about his damage, and then 498 on the resistance. So I stacked him up with resistance because he doesn't need any accuracy, so he might as well be a resistant unit. And the Relentless just helps him cycle through his abilities a lot quicker, gets more healing with the A3, more AoE HP burns on the A2, and then more activations on the A1. On the Blessing, honestly, I didn't really know what to do. I used to run Brimstone when it couldn't be removed at the start, and then they nerfed it to a degree, and so, or they nerfed it to require accuracy to land it, and so I switched it to Intimidating Presence. That's just kind of something that's just sitting there. Let me know, guys, if you know a better one for him, but for now, whatever team he's on, he just boosts the aura a little bit. So I broke my rule, like I mentioned, about using War Master in the Ice Golem, but like I said, I don't use Walking Tomb Drang there, and so for other content, I did come down the offense tree here to War Master on the to take advantage of that, because he has double hitter on the A1. Similar defense tree masteries to Theodore and Artak, where a little bit of tankiness, a little bit less damage from AoEs, and then making sure to get the Retribution hits, because if there's HP burn out there and he gets a counterattack, he can just run in there and tag them and activate an HP burn. Next up, we do have my PvE/PvP Pythion in a regen set. And he is almost 90,000 on the HP. I was really hoping to get that to 90,000, but I digress. Just under 3,000 on the defense, 254 on the speed. Don't care about his damage or accuracy, and I managed to perfectly get 0 accuracy in the build. So look at that. But 553 on the resistance. So he's trying to resist as much as possible, while also being sustainable with the regen set on. The blessing, like I mentioned, this is predominantly for Arena. I have Life Harvest on him, which is very powerful. Just gets him to destroy enemy max HP every time they get revived, and we are in a reviver meta, so it's a very, very powerful blessing. Working on getting him to 3-star so that I can get the heightened effect of that one. But the masteries here, focusing on defense and support tree, specifically coming down to Unshakable for extra resistance, retribution, so we can counterattack and pop some heals off. A lot of the damage reduction mastery, solidarity gives us a little bit of resistance. Shadow heal, so we can heal when enemies heal, stuff like that. Support tree, we're coming down basically all of the healing masteries, and then spirit haste again. We do want him to go fast if people are dead, or go faster when people are dead, so he can come around and pick them back up. Lasting gifts to extend the duration of block debuffs. Next up, we have my arena focused Mithrala, but she can also basically function in any area of the game in this build, and Untouchable and Perception. She has 75,000 on the HP, almost 4,000 on the defense, 26 or 265 on the speed. Don't care about her damage either. 200 on the resistance and 600 on the accuracy, but when you combine the two, she's effectively 800 resistance because of the way her passive works. On her, I'm running Temporal Chains, and that's because generally I run her on Go Second teams, and so if they place a lot of buffs, that decreases her speed, which helps her cut in, and ideally you would get to 6-star where I'd actually get turn meter, or decrease their turn meter for more active buffs. But essentially I want her to kind of slide in line and cut in and cleanse whatever, or cut in before the nuker goes and cleanse stuff and kind of ruin whatever their plan was on offense. For her masteries, we are coming down to Eagle Eye here on the support tree, because more accuracy is more resistance and accuracy, so you benefit more from biasing her towards accuracy. Obviously, we're picking up some of the debuffer masteries here, Master Hexer, Evil Eye. I opted to go for Rapid Response because she places more buffs than debuffs. There's like Hex and Poison versus increased defense, increased attack, strengthen, and shield. So I sacrificed the other one to go, or sacrifice Arcane Celerity to just go for Rapid Response, and then I wanted the extra accuracy because again that gives her more resistance. So it's defense tree, wanted some resistance, and then we're kind of coming down a little bit of healing here, shielding, a little bit of shadow heal, solidarity again because the more buffs she places, the more resistance she has on herself and all allies, and then coming down to get a retribution so she can counterattack and place some poisons if she takes a big hit. And of course, last up, we have the woman of the hour, my swole Harima, here in a Savage set and Perception. So 46,000 on the HP, 6,200 on the defense, which honestly is not even that impressive from the accounts that I've seen, but 213 on the speed, full crit rate, 308% crit damage, one of the highest on my account, so you can tell that she is an arena priority champion, so I built her very, very well. 197 on resistance, so a little bit, so you can resist some things from some nukers who just don't have no accuracy, and then 226 on the accuracy. And you could see that she was landing decreased attack here and there, and that was because of the aura lead on the team being Tuhanarok and or Mithrala with 70 or 80 accuracy respectively, so that brings her up to around 300-ish or so. And again, we want to target around 330, 350 to be able to land debuffs, so every once in a while with a 300-ish accuracy she lands decreased attack, which is kind of helpful on the team, but certainly not a priority. So I opted to go for her blessing with Soul Reap. I changed it. She used to have Polymorph, I think, just because before it kind of depended on the stats you got. The blessing you chose fixed the stats that you got. But since they reworked that recently, I went with Soul Reap because I think it's just a lot more powerful for her specifically, because she has a chance to, well, she has an AoE and then a chance to AoE if she kills someone's on the A2. So it's really nice for finishing people off. And I worked hard to buy her all the way up to 4 stars, and eventually I'd like to get her up to 6-star if I can, so for the maximum target HP threshold there. But yeah, work in progress. For the masteries, as you might suspect, she is built like a nuker, so we're coming down here to Helm Smasher. That is where we're ending, ignoring some defense or potential to ignore some defense. I like building Blood Shield on the more tanky champions who are nukers, so like HP based or defense based, just because they can take less damage, and having a bit of a shield on them just makes them harder to kill. Kill streak as well, and then a lot of your standard masteries to deal more damage. Shield breaker notably because we are in the bolster meta, so you do more damage to people under shields. And this is also great for like a Duchess who has a shield on her passive, so the first hit where you're breaking the shield, you just do more damage, stuff like that. Ruthless Ambush, Cycle of Violence, pretty standard nuker masteries. And on the defense tree, we want a little bit of damage reduction from AoEs. Resurgent, again, we want to remove some debuffs so she happens to take a slam. And then of course Retribution, because if she counterattacks, she most likely kills the nuker, provided she survived the hit. So yeah, that's going to do it for today's video. I did really want to showcase this team because I think it's a little bit different than the meta that we've seen for Ice Golem Hard. There's a lot of solo duo strategies out there with really cracked out regen solo type builds, which I find ridiculously hard to do. I don't know if you guys feel the same. Let me know in the comment section down below. But I find those really, really hard to pull off. You definitely need to be more end game to be able to do that. And I just find it easier to kind of spread out the stat requirements across an entire team of 5 versus trying to squeeze them into 2 champions to duo some content. Now, of course, in this case, we are featuring the same champions that you would use in one of those duo type strategies. We are using Artak. We are using Pythion/Elva if you have her. I showcased Walking Tomb Drang, who's very popular as well, Wither the Crowned I mentioned. So we are still using the same supports that you would use in that type of duo solo strategy. But like I said, we're stretching out the stat requirements across 5 champions instead of just condensing it into 2. Be sure to let me know in the comment section down below how far you've managed to progress in the Ice Golem, and if you have any more suggestions for this style of composition. I don't think Harima can be replaced, but I think most other champions have some sort of replacement that you could use in their stead. As always, if you did find this video helpful, then be sure to hit that like button down below, and if you enjoyed the video, then be sure to subscribe to the channel for more content just like this one in the future. Thanks for watching, and have a good one.